This is Nika Danilova from Zola Jesus, and you're listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. I'm your host, Keith, and we're back with a brand new episode. And in the guest host chair tonight, we've got returning guest, Joe Grillo. Joe, how's it going?
Fantastic, man. Things are wonderful. Having a hell of a day, honestly.
We've got a great show for you today. We've got Chris Enriquez, and you know him from his latest band on Iodine Recordings. You know him from many other wonderful bands as well, Spotlights, Primitive Weapons. We cover it all. We cover all the bands. We cover the new Light Tower EP on Iodine Recordings. And we just talk bands we like, shows we went to growing up in New York. We really covered it all in this one. It's a really great conversation. And that's coming up in a minute.
He's a hell of a guy to talk to as well. You know, I mean, he's got so many great stories and so many great experiences that he's a wealth of knowledge. And Chris is he's a pretty special guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've known him for a while now, right?
God, 20 some odd years. Yeah, 22 years maybe is the first time I met him. And he's just, you know, he's a lifer. He's one of those people that you if you play music on any sort of touring capacity, he's just someone that you are fortunate to know. He's a peer and someone I look up to and someone I'm inspired by. He's a really fantastic guy and pisses me off how talented he is. Like you see him play drums and you're like, okay, that's fine. You're a good drummer. But then you see him pick up a guitar and I'm like, God damn it, man. He's better at guitar than I am. And I spent a long time playing guitar. He's better at bass than I am. He plays bass in Judas Knife, one of my bands. He's just one of those nonstop, you cannot stop Chris Enriquez. He is a force.
He really is. I had no idea he played bass in Judas Knife.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't even mention that.
Yeah. It's something else.
Wow. Yeah, but we cover it all from his beginning in On the Might of Princes, all the way up until Light Tower. And, you know, he's subbed in for a lot of legendary bands. And as Joe just mentioned, he's very versatile. I really connected with him. This interview was the first time I spoke to him, but our taste really seems to line up. And Light Tower is right in that pocket of stuff that I like. It's really good.
Yeah, it hits all those bases, you know. I mean, like you can hear. It's always nice to hear somebody wearing their influences on their sleeve, but making their own music with their own unique voice, you know. And so, like, you can listen to it and be like, "Oh, I see his touchstones," but he's creating something that is unequivocally Chris.
100%, and that's coming up momentarily. But let's get some business out of the way. Here's how you can support us. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at New Scene Pod. Follow our YouTube channels. We've got a main channel with full episodes. We've got a clips channel with highlights from our favorite episodes. And we have a new gaming channel that has gaming content from my Twitch streams and other content that I make. Check those out. We've got shirts. We've got new shirts. And if you haven't seen them, they're great. We've got t-shirts. We've got logo t-shirts. We've got the Life is Music is Life long sleeve in a t-shirt option now. Grab one of those. It's a great way to support the show. You know, the funds from those shirts directly help me with the cost of this show. And I put all the money I make, I put right back in. I want to get a new audio set up soon. It's time to take it to the next level. So if you can help out and if you want to look good doing it, grab a t-shirt. And reviews, open up your Apple Podcast or Spotify application. Give us a 5-star review if you like the show. And if you write a nice review on Apple Podcasts, I will read it on the air. I wanted to share a nice message I got from Wolfsbeard on Instagram. They said, "Hey, Keith, keep up the great work. You keep me engaged with your guest interviews and choice of guests. New Scene is a cut above the rest. I can really tell that you respect and protect the hardcore aesthetic. Keep going strong, brother." So, Wolfsbeard, thank you so much for the nice message. Always nice to hear from everybody, and you can always email me at newscenepod@iodinerecords.com. And Joe, since you're one of the men behind the scenes at Iodine Recordings. Why don't you give us the Iodine updates?
Oh my God, so too many to mention. Iodine has been so busy recently. We did the Stretch Armstrong Rituals of Life reissue. I think that sold out in about 12 hours. That was about 2,500 records. There's a hand, but now I say that there might be a handful left in Europe. We just released the first single off the Darling Fire, their new album Distortions. The pre-order is up for that now. Orange Island, which was a reissue for One Night Stay, which is arguably their finest release. Pretty gorgeous stuff from those guys that I didn't get to see the light of day, or at least as much light of day as it gets now. Nathan Gray and the Iron Roses LP finally came out, so that is on the table. Her Head's on Fire. The fourth single for that came out, Rising Tide, and that album comes out this Friday, the 29th. We've just been busy, man. Things are going great between that. Hey, Thanks, Smoker Fire, Attempt Survivors, One Line Drawing finally came out. The record, it's nice to see people sending in photographs of the beautiful vinyl. It's nice, it's like you do all this hard work and that behind the scenes, and just you get that moment of someone enjoying the art, enjoying the physical and audio artwork that someone's done. And that's the payoff. That's what makes everybody happy.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's so many great bands, tons of great stuff happening all the time. It's almost too much to even keep up with, especially for you, I'm sure, Joe, because you're working on all of it all the time.
Yeah, but you know what? It makes me constantly inspired. I haven't. I went through a burnout phase in my late 20s, but I got over it. I'm re-inspired into everything right now.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Working on the podcast constantly, working with you and Casey constantly. It's like I'm working constantly, but it's stuff I want to be doing. So I feel fulfilled all the time. All right, so let's talk about some music recommendations. And I'm kind of still listening to all the same stuff. So Joe, what are you listening to? We need to give the people some new things to listen to.
I listen to things that sound like I do a lot more drugs than I do. Warpaint have a new record called Radiate Like This. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'm constantly floored when I listen to the interplay that band has. It makes me want to practice more. Fire Friend, which is a sort of psych rock band from Brazil, I just discovered in the last year and a half, maybe 2 years. And I've gotten really into digging into their back catalog. So much beautiful stuff to kind of trance out to. Caterpillars from Texas have a brand new record, kind of in that, Thursday, Jimmy Eat World kind of world, especially with some of their harmonies and the middle eights of some of their songs, the way they change chord structures, get really into that beautiful Static Prevails, Clarity era Jimmy Eat World stuff. I've been really into that. As much as I listen to stuff on Iodine Records and demos from my own bands, that's the stuff that's turning me on right now.
That Caterpillars record sounds really appealing. I got to check that out.
It's dope. It's up your alley. You'd really enjoy it. Speaking
of Texas, Joe, do you know I'm in Texas right now?
I'm so sorry.
I flew here. Yes, to our listeners, I'm coming to you live from Dallas, Texas right now. So if it sounds a little different, that's why I'm not at my normal setup. But I rushed here to the hotel to record this podcast with Joe for you. I mean, I just give and give, Joe. Isn't it wonderful?
It's you're one in a million.
Well, check back in with me and Joe in segment 3 because I want to know what he's up to. I want to know what Her Head's on Fire is up to. I want to know what Judas Knife is up to. And I want to know what you're up to personally, Joe. I'm going to dig into your personal life as well. Does that sound okay with you?
I'm an open book as far as you know.
Okay, good. So yeah, there'll be more from us, but right now we are going to speak to Chris Enriquez of Light Tower. Enjoy. We're here now with Chris Enriquez. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith. I really appreciate it.
Yes, Chris, it's wonderful to have you here. Reading about you, you seem to be one of the busiest people in music. We've got Spotlights. We've got Primitive Weapons. We had previously On the Might of Princes. I read that you're a drum teacher. And of course, we have the exciting Light Tower EP out now on Iodine Recordings. And Chris, we're going to cover all of that. But first, I must ask you a very important question. How are you doing today?
I'm good. You kind of like nailed it. I'm pretty busy, so I've had a busy day, but it's all self-inflicted at this point. So if I ever complain about it, it's my doing. So, but no, I'm really good. It's a beautiful, as you know, you're local, so it's a beautiful evening here in New York, and I'm loving the summer right now. So good vibes.
The weather is nice. The vibes are nice. This morning my fire and carbon monoxide alarm woke me up at 6 in the morning and would not stop beeping. So I had to get up and walk to the bodega to buy some batteries. And I was upset, but I was also happy because I'm like, hey, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm walking around. Nobody's out. It's nice. It's nice to get out and walk around in this city.
It is. We needed a summer like this. I know that it's not like we're totally safe yet from this horrible COVID situation, but at the same time, I think the city is vibrant again, and shows are happening, and bars are open, and I'm really into socializing, so it feels really nice to be out again. And like you said, even if you're just going for a walk, it's the time to do it. It's beautiful, So I'm loving New York right now.
Exactly. You grew up here, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was in Long Island, but not very far. So I did come here as early as I can remember. Single digits. So it's home.
Yeah, it must be a trip growing up here because I don't know. My life seemed pretty crazy just being in the suburbs of Philadelphia, but being in New York City at a young age, I mean, was it nuts? Or is it just life because you're here?
It was life, and I think that because my parents started the family here, they met in the 70s in New York when it was at its height of craziness, right? And then in the 80s, it was pretty wild. And my sibling was raised in Stuyvesant Town. So to us, even when they were bringing me down here, I was born in 1980, so I was coming here pretty early on. Like, I don't think that we realized it was that crazy. And they always make fun of me when I tell them about how insane some of the things are here, because they're like, it never dawned on them, right? Because it was just sort of waking up and seeing what was in front of them. So there was not much to compare it to. I think now, looking back at what it was like going to shows when I was allowed to kind of come in on my own with my friends, I can tell there's a big difference. But at the same time, it really feels like we still have, a lot of exciting things happening. It's different, but it's also not at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. Talk about some of your formative show going experiences and when they occurred. I'm curious about everybody's entry point in the scene and the bands they loved. Like, I got my start going to shows in Philadelphia and the surrounding areas, and everything was new and exciting. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of scary stuff, but there was also a lot of great stuff, good friends, good bands, all that.
Yeah, totally. It's so funny that you mentioned violence, because we kind of assumed that if you were going to go to certain shows, that was kind of part of the reason you were there. Not that you wanted to get hurt, but it wasn't like today, when I think some people are sort of like more offended by stuff. Like, I knew when I was going to Coney Island High in the 90s that I was at risk from the moment that I walked in there. But it was also like that on Long Island. So, to answer your question, I had some older friends in my high school. I grew up in a town called Manhasset, and between some of the seniors, I was probably, I was 14 years old when I went to my first hardcore show. And it was a mixture of a dude named Monty, who he grew up with like the Bridge 9 guys. And I remember him like talking about that before it became a thing. He was in Vermont and knew all those people. And he was a bit older. He had a car and he was into really good music. And he took us to a place called PWAC, which was a very legendary place on Long Island that hosted shows from Fugazi to Avail to Bouncing Souls. So my first show there was probably in 1994 or sometime around that time. It was Avail with Bad Trip and Garden Variety. And it was fucking nuts, man. Like, I walked into this place. It was the People with AIDS Coalition. So it was sort of this kind of like a raw space that did events to benefit HIV and AIDS research and victims, and just sort of like everything was always a charity over there, and it was run by people who were in bands like Silent Majority and Mind Over Matter and Millhouse. They were on a label called Wreck Age Records, and those people were probably a good 8-9 years older than me at the time, and that was sort of my introduction to Long Island hardcore. And the rest from there, I kind of figured out through flyers and word of mouth and whatnot.
So you're telling me your first show was a Vale and Garden variety?
That was my first show on Long Island, but it's a blur. Right around that time, my friend's older brother took us to see Sick of It All and Helmet at Roseland, and I can't remember which one was first, but that was my first New York City show, and then that show that you just mentioned was my first Long Island show. It was kind of like right in the same time period.
Incredible. Yeah, I've heard a lot about. I remember Coney Island High from back in the day, but I didn't make it up to New York City for many shows. It just seemed like so distant and so far, like this mystical land almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think back then, just going to another town in Long Island seems like going outside of your comfort zone, so that's what made it so exciting is, just going outside of like the place that you go to high school and seeing other people like you. And now it's probably not as strange, but I think that because we lived in a pre-social media world, it was a little bit more like there was more of a wow factor when you experience things like that.
Exactly. It's so weird thinking about the past when I was here. One of my first shows, it was actually my first show in New York City. I think it was a Revelation Records showcase or maybe an Equal Vision Records showcase. I can't remember, but it was at this club in the Village, and it was Saves the Day and Game Face and Converge and all these other bands. And I walk by it now and I'm like, wow, like I actually know this neighborhood. And look, there's Katz's 2 blocks away. And I didn't even know what that was at the time. It's weird to like understand the city now after all this time.
It is. And I think that like the age of innocence is sort of what we're talking about, because you're kind of stumbling into things and you're not sure what to expect. And that sort of lack of awareness really is a time that you can never replicate. So to have those experiences, especially for people like us who were in that pre-social media period, it's just a special thing, man. It's hard to put into words. And I know what you're talking about, because I don't recall being at that particular show, but I was at shows where a lot of those bands played, and it was always just like, I mean, sometimes I didn't even know what I was going to see. Like the first time I saw Lifetime, they were opening up for Bouncing Souls, and I never heard of them. And, years later, they're this legendary band. And, I can say that about so many. At the Drive-In was another one. These are bands that I just literally stumbled into a place and they were playing, and I had no idea who they were,
Right. Yeah, I like the way you put that, the age of innocence. And, that's something that we experienced that'll never come back, because now I can just go somewhere and jump on Google Maps and there's pictures of the place and I know exactly where to go. There's no more wandering. There's no more scariness. I guess the only way to replicate that would be to go to a completely different country where I don't know the language. And I'm sure I would get myself really lost.
That's a really good point. I mean, I guess the closest thing that you could do with that is maybe when you're in another city that you're unfamiliar with, like you said, but it is really hard to replicate that, because if we were in a time period where I could be like, oh, I heard about At the Drive-In on the algorithm on Spotify and it came up on a playlist, maybe I wouldn't have been as shocked or taken back when I walked in and there they were on stage at Tramps opening up for Archers of Loaf and Knapsack, like a bunch of fucking Hispanic dudes from Texas losing their minds. I wasn't prepared for that when I walked into that room,
That's one band I never saw. I would say that's the band I really wish I would have seen more than anything, because everybody who talks about them like still remembers that live show, no matter who it is.
It was really, and context always makes a lot of difference here. Like it was really something else. I mean, I wasn't around to see, let's say, A Nation of Ulysses, for example. And I know that's where a lot of that sort of refused at the drive-in and whatever, they kind of like came from that cloth. But, maybe I would have felt that way if I was in DC at the right time and saw that, but I never was. So when I saw At the Drive-In and they were just bouncing off the walls playing this music, I was totally mesmerized and I needed to buy their album. I think it was In Casino Out. And it was a life-changing thing at that time, it was really special.
Oh, big time. Yeah, that's the first one that hooked me with them as well. So when did you decide you wanted to start playing, and how did you get started?
I was playing actually really early on. I was about maybe 8 or 9 years old because I was watching MTV at the time, and I was really into rock music. It was sort of a nice outlet for me to, I wasn't into sports or things like that, and I just really needed an outlet. And for some reason, I gravitated towards rock music, and I loved watching these metal and hard rock bands on MTV, which was mainstream at the time. So I picked up on that pretty quickly, and the drummers in these videos resonated with me. It's almost unexplainable, but I just would watch the drummers and something clicked. And so I learned how to play drums from listening to like Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, and probably like some Motley Crue and that sort of thing. And I started my first bands when I was in high school. And when I discovered hardcore, I started playing in the local scene. So I was probably 8 or 9 when I started, and about 14 when I started actually like getting out and playing, with other bands in that sort of underground culture.
Wow, so you got an early start.
Yeah. I can't say that I was necessarily aware of much, but I was looking back I am very fortunate that I got that leg up for sure.
Plus, being a drummer and wanting to be a drummer is great because you're just guaranteed to always be in multiple bands. There's a shortage of drummers.
It's so strange. I still don't understand why, but you're absolutely right. There's always bands seem to go through drummers all the time, or they just never can hold one down. I know over the years people have hit me up because nobody can ever hold one down. So but I don't know why. I really don't know why.
Well, I think, I think it's one of, if not the most important pieces of the band. It really shapes everything.
You're right. There's that sort of ongoing joke or saying, which is your band is as good as your drummer. And that's proven if you listen to like Bleach by Nirvana, which is a fantastic album, and then you hear Dave Grohl playing those songs live. It's like night and day. It's a different band.
Yeah. So you're playing locally. I'm thinking about the logistics of being in a band in New York City. You're out on Long Island, so I guess you're just getting driven everywhere, right?
I was really close. So I was either getting driven or, we had the train line for me to get to Manhattan was about 30 minutes. So I was like just on the border of Queens. So, it wasn't hard to get there for shows, but if I was to go see shows, but if I was playing, I would take a ride, and it was again still like it was under an hour. It would be like 45 minutes tops to drive in there.
Yeah, it's a pain being in a band here because I don't know, you have to like shove everything into an Uber, or who knows what you weren't carrying drums on the subway with you back in the day, were you?
No, and I don't recall backline being a thing. For non-musicians listening, like backline is basically like when you show up to a club and they just have equipment for you.
Yeah.
I don't think, I could be wrong, but maybe we never thought to ask, but I don't recall that being available to us back then. So you had to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't remember backline being a thing at all. Then again, I wasn't seeing shows at many legitimate spots, so who knows?
Yeah. I really don't know, but you're absolutely right. I had like a soccer mom van, and I was able to drive myself around by the time I was 18. But prior to that, it was either my parents, who were very supportive and cool, or a buddy that was older that would have to help us lug our shit in there.
Yeah, remember we would do car caravans and everything to get to shows and whatnot?
Yeah, and if your friend's band was playing, or if you knew somebody, then even better, then you consolidate.
Exactly. So, On the Might of Princes, this was the first band where you really got out into the world and started touring and everything, yes?
Yes, correct.
Let's talk about that. Talk about kind of how it came together and how you started getting out into the world and playing.
So On the Might of Princes was a band that I heard about because they were on a flyer for a Promise Ring American football show at NYU, which had to have been around early 98. And I was at that time getting into things like Fugazi and Jawbox, and I'd seen sort of and Sunny Day and all that stuff, right? And I think I saw Promise Ring at the PWAC around that time, so my tastes were evolving, and I couldn't believe there was a band from where I was from that was kind of in that profile, because most of the stuff I had been exposed to was either like kind of Lifetime type stuff or real tough guy, madball kind of stuff. There was either one or the other. It was not much in between. There was a couple of cool indie rock bands, but for the most part, that's what I was kind of seeing anytime my friends wanted to go out. So I found out about these guys and saw them and loved it. It was kind of like Unwound or just one of those cool bands that you had heard about, but never would you ever see something like that in your local scene. So I quickly befriended them and found out that they were looking for a drummer. Their drummer at the time, Nicole, played on the first full length and parted ways. So really nice people, and I tried out, and I was in the band around 98 or so. And that's when we started working on the album Where You Are and Where You Want to Be. And my first tour took place like right before we recorded that. Not a very glamorous tour. I'm sure you've heard the tales before, but it was really nice to get outside of the city and see what the rest of the country was like. And we certainly experienced it, to say in the very least.
Yeah. How was that for you? I mean, the first tour I did was in 2002, and it was a full US, and it was certainly not glamorous. If you managed to get a hotel one night, like that was the pinnacle of glamour. And that was not a common thing. Usually you're sleeping in the van or some stranger's house, but I absolutely loved it. It's memories I still think about till this day. And I'm glad I got to do it. Getting to see the whole country. I had never seen most of the places I had been. How was it for you?
It was probably the same as it was for you. I just had no expectation level. I probably had an idea of what I wanted it to be like, but we booked all of it on. There was a magazine called Book Your Own Fucking Life. I think you probably have heard of that before. It's like you used to be able to go in there and look at every state alphabetically and find promoters. And so it was just sort of like crossing your fingers that the show was actually going to happen and that this was a real person, et cetera. And sometimes shows didn't happen. Sometimes they did. Sometimes no one was there. And it really felt like proper training. I didn't think that at the time, but looking back on it, it's like, you're training for what will happen later. You have to go through this before anything decent or good happens for you. And so I went through it for a while. We did a lot of tours like that. And anytime there was a show that was actually good, meaning like 25 or 30 plus people, and people bought your merch, it was like a huge win. And those are the moments that I'll never forget. And just being young with my friends and figuring out, are we sleeping on the beach tonight? Are we sleeping at this person's house? Or whose turn is it to find a stranger that can put us up? Like we did that for an entire US tour, and made it back home. Like it's unbelievable that we made it that far,
It sounds crazy now, but it also sounds exciting. I love the idea of just going out there, and you hope the venue's there, you hope the show is happening, you hope you find anywhere to sleep. It sounds appealing. I wouldn't want to do it now at 40 years old, but I don't know. It still sounds appealing.
I mean, I have a good story from that tour briefly, which is that we had a show in Compton and this is in like 1998, and mostly white kids. I'm a person of color, and we were on tour with another band with one person of color, but it's like mostly like white suburban kids. And we rolled up to Compton to some venue, and the show was canceled, and we found ourselves with like some questionable people that I don't know, like we were trying to figure out like where to stay and what to even do, and we like found like some like motel and like stayed there. It's so crazy to like think back. And I was probably 17 years old, and I'm like in Compton staying in like a weird shitty motel, and I cherish those memories. It goes back to that age of innocence. Like I would never do that now, but it's so cool to look back and just be like, we're figuring these things out, and they help you later on in life in more ways than you realize,
Oh, big time. Yeah. I feel like I can survive anything now.
Totally. I mean, shit, like it's, you don't learn how to live off of like pocket change in college, or things about friendship and how to be a good person, sure, there's fundamentals but like those sorts of things that are so personal, those are priceless, you know what I mean? And they're life changing. So I it's really nice to look back at those memories and talk about it now and appreciate it in a different way.
Yeah, and when you're young, you're so full of hope. I remember being out with my friend's band, like they're talking about recording the next record. Are we going to make it? Are we not going to make it? Are we going to be able to do the band still? It's just like, you don't know what's going to happen. Everything seems so strange.
Yeah, and it's really cool talking to you about this, because I've done a bunch of podcasts, and I feel like a lot of the same topics become regurgitated or rushed. And I on this particular part of my life, I like to kind of reflect and think about how we weren't trying to get big or do anything that most bands do today. It wasn't really on our mind. We just kind of wanted to play shows and have fun. Like we were too young and immature and dumb to think that far ahead. Nobody was wondering if labels were going to come see us, or if like any cool opportunities were going to happen. We just wanted to play music. So that's a really nice memory to harp on a little bit, because now it's hard to not think about that stuff when you are out playing music. It's like almost automatically in your brain that you hope for these things that back then you don't even think about.
Exactly. Yeah, I wanted to ask what your mindset was at the time, because you sound so young. So I guess you're like between the ages of 17 and 22 when this band is going on. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we broke up. I was 22, or I was about 22, maybe 23 tops by the time we broke up.
So are you pretty much just thinking, get to the next show, play the next show? Are you thinking long term? Like where's your head at this age? Me, I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
I did have like it in mind that I wanted to play drums in a band and how cool it would be to do that. But I don't think I had the intelligence level yet to even understand how that would happen. And this is pre Thursday and like Taking Back Sunday and all of that stuff. So like it didn't really seem like that was a possibility yet. Once that door was broken down, I think that changed everything for everybody. For some of us for the better, for some of us maybe for the worse. At that time, I did know that I loved playing drums and playing music, but I didn't know how you were even supposed to go about making that your life.
100%. I didn't even know how to get in a band. I didn't do that until 2004. So, but I was seeing all these exciting things happening around me. Dillinger Escape Plan blowing up, Poison the Well blowing up, Thursday blowing up. So I was like, man, if I could just somehow get into this, I just didn't know how.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and all you have is your imagination and your dreams. Now things are so much more obvious, and I think it's great because it is the good thing about that today is that like if you have a goal, there's so much you could just look up online and figure out how to get from point A to point B, or just go in a forum and ask somebody. But even back then, to me, blowing up at our level would be like Snapcase or or like Converge or something like that
Exactly.
seemed like you blew up. Or like Sensefield or Texas 3, like any of that, that seemed like you blew up, you know?
Yeah, that's still my definition of blowing up. Like, I don't, anything beyond that is just like almost imaginary to me. I'm like, wow, if you could play shows the size Converges, you've made it. That's it.
That's, that's how I felt. And now looking back, they were playing clubs and packing them out.
Yeah.
I mean, things have changed since then, but at that time specifically, they were playing places that might have not been that much bigger than the places we were in, except their shows were sold out, So,
Yeah. One thing I've realized too, talking to so many musicians like yourself on this show, is that I looked at these guys as like heroes, and I still do, but I looked at them as like these mythic figures and like almost older than me, almost like adults, but we're pretty much all the same age. Like we were all growing up and figuring out things together, which I didn't really realize.
totally. I mean, but I think that I was the same way as you. That's how I saw it. I mean, I was very much like idolizing a lot of these guys that I was watching play clubs when I was young, because it seemed like such a far reach. Like, I knew that when I saw Avail that they were from Virginia and that they were in Long Island. So that seemed kind of wild that I saw that they were playing the country. But, at the same time, when you look back at it now, they were kids just doing that,
Yeah.
It was just that, like, and people were doing that before them. So, it doesn't take away from that experience that you have that's so personal when it's you, though, and nothing can replace that. So I think that, I love that I was able to be, experiencing that in that same context before things changed,
So 2004, you're what, 22 years old?
I was 23 at that point.
On the Might of Princess is done, right?
Yes. Yeah. We broke up and, we were on Revelation at that point and put out a full length record that came out. We did a European tour. That was kind of like our first and final, taste of like that sort of, bigger leap that everyone else was taking. And then I started a band called Gracer, who was also on Rev. And that was a very short lived project, but, also kind of like, not in the same vein, but like in that sort of post-hardcore is so vague, right? So it was still sort of like in the family tree of that genre, I guess you could say.
So after these bands end, what is your plan? Do you still want to do music? Did you ever think you were going to be out of music?
I was going to school to be a journalist, and my dream at that time was to be a music journalist. So I never thought that drumming could be a full-time job. And I felt like maybe writing, because I liked reading magazines, everything from Rolling Stone to like small fanzines. So I would pick up Antimatter fanzine, or we had this thing called Under the Volcano that was really popular in Long Island. And In Effect fanzine was another good one. So I was just like, shit, like I could write, and I assumed that these people made money, So I was very naive. I'm like, oh, like this guy that has this magazine that's on sale at Generation must make money doing this, But
Journalism's like the one thing where you're guaranteed not to make any money ever, pretty much.
yeah, I learned that pretty quickly because I got some really cool opportunities. I did a front cover story for Death and Taxes, which was an old magazine. It used to be called Law of Inertia. And I did a front cover story on Bad Brains, and I got to interview Dr. No and Daryl Jennifer. But I didn't get paid that much. So I learned pretty quickly, like even when you do cool shit like that, like this is not going to pay my bills. So I did that for a while. And then eventually I started booking bands at small clubs in the Lower East Side. And that paid my bills. And I kind of networked throughout that time, got into ad sales for media outlets, which is what I do now with Revolver, The Hard Times, and Brooklyn Vegan, and a bunch of others. That's my full-time job now. So kind of fast forwarding, but I just stayed in music and entertainment and kind of just kept networking and trying to see where it would take me and what would actually pay my bills. And that's kind of where I landed, is, working at media outlets, but like selling ads and handling marketing initiatives and whatnot.
How does that work? You have to go out to places and pitch ads or something like that?
So it's a two-part sort of thing. So one part of my job is I'm constantly dealing with record labels on email, and on, phone calls, Zooms and whatnot, and finding out what records they have coming out. So, I work with everyone from Metal Blade to Nuclear Blast, for example, and we brainstorm what we want to do for like a Lamb of God record and what's going to help sell the most copies. And so that's one part of my job. And then I also work with like Live Nation and find out about tours, like, Mastodon's going on tour and what can we do to help sell more tickets. And recently we started selling actual vinyl and merchandise on our website. So I also broker kind of deals with management and labels to help push all that stuff out. So that's what I do for a living now. And it took a long time though. I just fast forwarded 20 years basically.
Yeah, it was 20 years for me too to get where I am today, and I still work a corporate job, but it just so happened that I ended up with a great division where I have a lot of freedom and I work from home and I don't have to travel anymore and I don't have to put on a suit that often and I don't have to go to offices really too much anymore. And God, am I lucky, because when I think about years and years and years of doing that, it's not fun. It's just not.
I agree with you, and I'm glad to hear that, because it's so what's the right thing to say here? It's so common, it's the American dream to just like get this job where you like go to this place and you hang out there in a suit from 9 to 5 and you wait until you can retire and you have your vacation time. And, I'm not going to discourage anyone from doing that feels like that's for them. My parents did it and they're great and they retired and they're amazing. But I knew that was not going to work out for me. I tried it and I just couldn't fathom that for my life. Every day is so precious. I can't sit in a cubicle like that. And I'd rather actually work. I've worked every job you could imagine, from Guitar Center to Starbucks. I'd rather do that, if I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I just wasn't cut out for that corporate life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've researched about you and I've heard that you worked corporate jobs before and you just explained what you're doing now. How do you get out? How do you build that up?
I guess let me answer that the best way I can. Like, I was like, my mother, who is an immigrant from the Philippines, she's like kind of my role model. She worked at NBC for a long time, and she's just a hustler. And she always had the ability to go out anywhere, whether it was Chinatown or just like a local store, and just like always negotiate. She was always negotiating for a deal. And I think that had some sort of effect on me. And I learned how to like be a people person through that, maybe. And I would kind of naturally kind of always felt like I was like promoting or selling something. I know it sounds gross, but it's like I can kind of turn it off. But she was just a really good business person. And I really took a lot of that into my own my personality, and so it's natural to me when I'm at a show now to like kind of like I might be talking to someone and I might just have like some crazy idea and want to talk about it instead of just being like a spectator, if that makes any sense. I'm always just like thinking about some cool opportunity for a band or a label or a venue or anything. It's just my brain is wired that way. So I think over the years of being that way, I was able to sort of navigate socially to connect with certain people that helped me land the job that I have.
That's great. I love that. Yeah.
I didn't get this job until I was 34. And I had so many weird jobs, some corporate, some not, in between that time. So like, I just, you never know when something lands up on your lap. I had no idea I was going to end up doing music. You know what I mean? It was definitely not what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah. I had no idea I was going to end up doing a podcast, and here we are.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. And you have like the best guests. That's why I was so excited to be here.
Well, you can count yourself among them now, Chris.
Thank you very much, Keith.
And thank you for saying that, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I enjoyed Jonah Matranga, Walter, of course, and more recently Adam McGrath. I'm still chopping down your episodes, but it was exciting to have this on the schedule for today.
I have been fortunate, I will say that, because even before meeting Casey and hooking up with Iodine, we managed to get a lot of good guests. And I would think the pandemic played into that a bit because it was new. The podcast was new. So I was just reaching out to people and saying like, hey, you want to come on? And sometimes they would say yes.
Absolutely. And Casey is a wonderful human being. It's he's passionate, and he is one of those people that there's a lot of labels that are out there that are not as in touch with the artist, and he's not one of those people. He's so hands-on and so involved, and I just can't say enough good things about him and Joe Grillo. It's a wonderful label to be a part of.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I wonder how Casey and Joe managed to do everything that they do with just them, because they are very involved and they have such great insight, like it's like you said, he's involved, and he just sees things. He just has great advice and great insight.
Yeah, you have to for this kind of stuff, because we're in a niche sort of subculture, and you're not doing this for money. I mean, if you can make money now because people have seemed to revisit a lot of the things that we all thought were cool 20 years ago, all of a sudden, which is amazing for us. But it starts with passion when you're going to get involved with this kind of thing. It has to be something that you love.
100%. And this is a good segue. Let's talk about Light Tower. This is the new band. We have an EP out on Iodine Recordings. Talk about how it came together. Talk about some of your influences. And folks, if you haven't heard it, you absolutely have to. If you like darker, moodier, post-hardcore, with like a pinch of failure and hum, that's really my sweet spot. I listen to a lot of bands like that. I love bands like that. A lot of the music I end up writing sounds like that. I love it, Chris. So tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I basically had a collection of songs forever, and I just never had the guts to do anything with it, because I never sang in front of human beings before, not even my friends or family. It was something I knew I wanted to do, but I didn't know when. And I just turned 40, shortly before the pandemic happened. So, it was kind of like the right time, because I felt like I was getting older, and I was spending a lot of time that first 6 months in 2020, like isolated at home. I was totally freaked out. I know a lot of people were, but I was so strict about it. And if anything, I don't think I would have ended up doing the Light Tower stuff had the pandemic not happened. I felt pressure to like find ways to occupy my time. So, I started doing some online interviews like what you're doing with the Age of Quarantine on the St. Vitus channel, so that it could make me feel like I was interacting with human beings and talking to artists and people that I shared things in common with. And then I learned how to self-record myself at home, and that's how the whole thing came about. And it also allowed me a lot of time to hone it in and listen back and be like, that's not so good, let me try that again. And so the 3 songs that are out on Iodine right now were the sort of the ones that I felt really good about.
Yeah, I think they're great. And how long did you want to do a band like this before you actually did it? Like, I wanted to sing. I can remember wanting to sing when I was 24, and I didn't actually try it until I was 36. I was just too afraid.
Yeah.
I'm still too afraid, but I do it. Like, how long were you thinking about doing this? And well, let me start there. How long were you thinking about doing this before you actually did it?
For a long time. It's hard to figure out like the exact time, but it was always in the back of my head that I knew how to write songs, and I had been playing bass and guitar and other instruments for a long time. But I think that because I was playing drums in other people's bands, like I was so used to following, whoever the main songwriter was, or groups of songwriters. And it never dawned on me that I should ever tamper with that or insert my opinion. Right. I just kind of went along with whatever the band wanted to do. So, maybe it was 15, 20 years. I don't know, but it was a long time that I knew I wanted to do it. And I was 40, like I said, when I finally pushed myself to. And even now, I'm still just getting comfortable. But having that first show, I think, when you finally get out and sing in front of people, once you get over that hump, at least for me, the second time around was easier, and now it's a lot more less nerve wracking, I'll say. So yeah, it's very liberating. It's extremely liberating to just get that off of your bucket list.
I can't wait to hopefully do it soon, because I fronted a band for the first time in 2018, but we broke up right after we put out the record, so we never got to play a show. But I'm putting together something now, and so I may finally sing live. That's on my bucket list too.
I would love to hear what you're doing. What bands did you play in?
Let's see. The last band was called The Basement Year. I was in a band called Zombie Fight. They're like a New York hardcore band.
Yeah, I know that. Wait a second. I'm friends with oh my god, Hillary. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Hillary and I are friends.
I was in that band from 2014 to 2015. But then we broke up. Let's see. I was in a band with members of All Else Failed and Backwards Payback called Crash of 64, and we mostly just played around Philly. And that's about it. Some other stuff too.
I love Hillary, and I see him often at shows. That's really cool. I didn't know that you guys were in a band together.
Yeah, he's great. The band was great. I still see him at gigs, so he's awesome.
Well, we'll have to get together sometime with him. That'd be really cool.
Absolutely, I'm down for that. And so how did you start singing? Like, how did you piece it together? Me, I would book the practice space at Sweatshop when that was around, and I would get there half an hour early to like try to find the way to sing that sounded the least bad, or I would just book a session by myself and try different ranges to figure out what would work best. How did you do it? Where did you do it?
I did it on my couch with GarageBand during 2020, right? And I was like kind of just sitting here. Once I figured out how to record all the tracks on GarageBand and program the drums, then I had the ability to sing and listen back, and I played it for friends, and it was really scary and embarrassing, but I played it for people I knew would be honest with me, who either knew how to sing or just I respected their opinion. You know what I mean? And I had to have some thick skin because some of the stuff was like pretty embarrassing, and I was lucky enough that my friends were pretty honest with me when they liked something or didn't, and I just found my range. I'm like, okay, I can do like a mid-level kind of vibe. Like I listen to Oasis, and I know that I can sing along to that really well. Like I warm up to that. It's like, it's in my vocal range. I'm not going to put on Rush. I'm not going to put on like, and I know that like, I'm not Freddie Mercury, but I put on Oasis, and, I'm never going to be as good as Liam or Noel, but I can sing in that register. So once I established that, I kind of figured out what my place was in the world.
That makes sense. I did that too. I didn't figure out till I was in the studio. I was doing one song in a really high range. I was trying to do like a Rush or Anthony Green thing. And I'm recording, and I'm like, I turned to my friend, the engineer, and I'm like, this isn't working, is it? And he's like, well, we try, and this doesn't say anything about your talent. He did like a really nice thing, and I was like, okay. So I dropped it down to like Matt Talbot range, and then I was like, okay, I'm more comfortable down here.
Yeah, I think that Matt Talbot is a great example of like somebody who is so subtle, but it's perfect. It's like you don't have to push it if it's not going to work for you. Like working, I feel like it's like that in life. Like if you're good at just playing power chords and you're never going to be a shredder, then write the best song that you can write with power chords and fucking strum the shit out of it. It's like if you can't play like you're in Meshuggah, but you can play like, four on the floor, then play the fucking best four on the floor beat and kill it, So it's kind of like a fundamental, I guess, at this point I've kind of jammed into my brain. I know what I can't do. And I know what I can, I think, at this point.
Exactly. I'm the same way. And when I heard Light Tower, we must have similar taste or maybe similar play style, because I heard it and I'm like, this sounds like what I would write. I love that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if you ever end up doing stuff, we should play together. We'll figure it out. We're local to each other.
We have to. I'm determined to get this set finished. It's taking a while because there's been a lot of delays with pandemic and other things, but I'm focused now. I haven't played a gig in a long time. I need to do it.
Absolutely. But yeah, the influences I think are probably similar. I'm sure that you and I have a lot of that in common because of the types of guests you have on your show. I mean, I fundamentally can't write without doing like a pop structure. Maybe I'll deviate from it, but I think I just listened to too much pop music growing up. So it's just always like this verse, chorus, verse, bridge, chorus, kind of formula, but melody and I think darkness is something that I always kind of have in there because for me, it's just sort of, part of like why I listen to music. I listen to a lot of like stuff out of, at least when I was younger, out of frustration. So it's either always dark or angry. But at my age, I'm not really, I'm not starting a metalcore band at my age and screaming into a mic. I don't have that in me. So I think that having a little bit of a somber darkness is always sort of like a thing that ends up in everything I write without me even thinking about it. It just kind of ends up that way.
I'm with you on that, except I still do dream of like fronting a hardcore band one day. I never got to when I was younger, so who knows? One day.
I dream about it sometimes too. I do play guitar in a band called Total Meltdown. That's kind of our version of Cro-Mags or Leeway and that sort of old school New York hardcore. But I'm playing guitar. I'm not walking around and fucking shouting in people's faces at this point in my life.
I do that, just not in a band. No, I'm just kidding. So there's many projects you're involved with. We have Primitive Weapons. This is a great band.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a band that's kind of on hiatus. We tried for a long time, and truth be told, like I loved playing in the band, but at the same time, it just didn't really feel like it was going past a certain ceiling. We kind of felt like we hit a ceiling. We did some really great tours, and Dillinger Escape Plan, Mutoid Man, Quicksand, and Glassjaw. We did some really great shit, but we did like so many. Jesus, I'm thinking back, like Take Back Sunday, Circus Survive, but the band just like stayed at like it got a little bigger, but it never really. It just felt like it hit a ceiling, and a bunch of us were involved with other things, and we kind of just like one day we were just like not playing anymore. But we might play again. But it was a really fun band, and we put out a few records, so they're out there at least in the world,
Yeah, folks, check them out if you have not heard them. Primitive Weapons, excellent band. It's like more in the noisy hardcore vein. I love that kind of stuff.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. That's the kind of stuff that I grew up listening to. So it was cool to kind of dabble in that,
And of course, Spotlights. Now, this is a fantastic band. It's like post-metal, shoegaze. I love it. I love that kind of stuff as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my main, I'd say my main band, because it's not like I wouldn't do something with Light Tower if like the opportunity, if I could get on a really great tour, of course we're going to do it. But Spotlights is like the band that I actually get to go out and play like pretty cool tours and go overseas with, and it's just a really cool thing to be a part of. I'm so happy I met Mario and Sarah when I did, and it's been really cool. We have a new record that we're working on right now.
Oh, nice. When can we expect that?
Definitely next year. We're kind of in the middle of writing it, and we've done some pre-production, and I can't wait to get this out because it's a little bit different from the stuff that we've put out, but also not different enough where we're going to lose people or go over their heads. It's I don't think anyone likes making the same record over and over again, so we're really trying not to do that. But it's so cool and fun to play with Mario and Sarah. They're just like really nice human beings, and it's hard to come across that. They're really sweet people.
Yeah. How did you hook up with them? They moved here from the West Coast, right?
Yeah, they moved here from San Diego. They're a couple, and they were looking for drummers. And if I understand it correctly, I think they were going to St. Vitus. To check out bands and make friends. But I feel like they were going there also like watching drummers and trying to figure out who they could poach, because they did poach a few early on that didn't work out. And that's ultimately how they found me, because they were watching me play in another band. And they were just, Primitive Weapons had the same publicist. I heard Titles, which was one of the first releases, and I was blown away because I love Failure and Hum and Deftones, and not that the band totally sounds like that, but I think at the time, like, those were some really good comparisons, and I have finally met them at St. Vitus, and it just was the right time, and they were looking for a drummer to fill in on a Deftones tour.
Oh my God.
So my first show with them was opening for Deftones and Refused, and that was my intro to the band, and that was about 6 years ago.
Was your head exploding? I mean, I would have been.
Dude, all right. I don't know if I could tell this whole story, but I do want to make your podcast more interesting than like most people that just tell their life story, and I certainly have done that. But I almost got kicked off the tour before I played.
Why?
I had a few things going on, which I was doing a lot of drugs, and I was drinking a lot, and I had to get sober for a while, and I kicked the drug habit. But I don't think that I was like prepared to like walk into a situation where now I'm playing. Like I played big shows, but like when I showed up to the Deftones Refused, like backstage, I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, like there's fucking catering and unlimited amounts of booze. I'm like, this is the dream. Like, this is crazy. Like, and it was the first week was a different drummer. So they invited me to the Coney Island Amphitheater to watch them play before, like a couple days before I was about to start my leg of the tour, which was like, I think it was the last 2 weeks. It was like 3 weeks or something like that. And I got fucking loaded backstage, and the whole night is a blur, but it was definitely noticeable to Deftones management, and they were like, who the fuck is this guy backstage? And I started my tenor off by having to apologize for getting too fucked up that night. And by the time I played my first show, which was like, a couple days later, I was forgiven, and eventually, everybody kind of got to know me and knew that I just had a bad night. But it was an interesting ride. And my head was exploding. I was extremely nervous. Most of the time, you don't really expect the bands that you're opening up for to watch. That particular night at Stone Pony, I remember seeing Chino on side stage, and Dennis, and like the whole, like Abe Cunningham, one of my favorite drummers. So I was like nervous as fuck, but I didn't really let it affect me. I felt like it was like everything I had dreamt for, So I kind of just owned it. I was like, fuck, this is my time,
That's great. And I'm really glad that worked out, because that would have been like a terrible memory if it's like you get kicked off the tour and that's it. So was it just that one show that went bad and then you pulled it together?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I skipped some details. Like I lost my backstage pass. They had to get me a new one. I was, when you go to a concert and like, you're watching, like there's screens that are like 800 feet tall, and you could see the band. Like apparently I was just sloshed on stage during Deftones, so you could see me on those screens. So it was a rough night, but, that was the only bad night. And I became friends with everyone, in Refused and Deftones and the whole crew, and we're all cool now. But it was a scary introduction for me into the band, to go into it like that. And I can't believe they kept me in the band this whole time. So I should publicly thank my bandmates for forgiving me for that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did you go sober after that?
I went sober, a couple times where it would be like 7 months, 8 months. And then I actually went 3.5 years. And it was really to sort of kick this, like, I'm just going to say it. It was a coke habit. I was really involved in nightlife, and I just, New York City is such a tough place in a way, depending on who you're friends with and what you're involved with. And I was just falling into a deep, dark hole, and it was no good. And now I'm kind of, it's been years, and I drink, but in moderation, and I have not done hard drugs or anything like that for quite some time.
Yeah, no, that's my story too. I was a mess for 15 years and it took a village to get me to stop. So I haven't done anything in over 5 years now, but it has to be that way for me because there is no moderation. It just can't be done.
Right. It's like all or nothing. I felt like that for a while too. And then I start to get, and congratulations, by the way. I know it's not easy. Obviously, we share this in common.
Thank you.
But I was like sort of like annoyed with like the sober world too, because it was like people in the sober world when I went to meetings and stuff would make it seem like I was just like them and it had to be all or nothing. And I just needed to make my own sort of life for myself. And I know it's different for everybody, but I've never been like a groupthink person. So no, there's nothing that ever like really works well for me when there's rules. So I just had to kind of like figure it out for myself. And it's, it's still, one of those things where, you're not invincible, but thank God, knock on wood, I've been able to, kick that habit and go out and still survive,
Yeah. And if you can make it work on your terms, that's fantastic. I would love to still be able to go out and get hammered once in a while and not have it be a disaster. But before I did what I was doing now, I tried every combination of everything, substitution or just stopping altogether. Like no matter what I tried, I would end up back in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it becomes harder in a way when your surroundings and the things that you're interested in are still the same.
Yeah.
I know people that like left and went and became fucking like Buddhist and moved to like Asia or whatever, like drastic lifestyle changes. Like I have no plans of leaving New York and I have no plans of not working in music or being in a band. So like, every time we go out, we're dealt with the same, hand of cards, as they say. So, it's very, it's Groundhog's Day. And I'm watching this show right now called, Shining Girls, where this person travels through time and like, it's like Groundhog's Day, but like somehow like based on the decisions of people that are made, you have to kind of watch it, but it kind of changes the course of their fate. And so, it reminds me of kind of what we're talking about right now. Cause you wake up and you have the same things in front of you, but if you can train your mind somehow to not do the same thing you did yesterday, you never know, your day could end up way better,
Yeah. I used to be a menace going to clubs and places in Bushwick and St. Vitus and all that stuff, just out of my mind, drunk and high. And now I can go to those places and be fine. Now, granted, it can be difficult. Like when I go to St. Vitus, sometimes it's a little difficult. And I'm like, wow, I used to come here and get really effed up. And I would still like to do that. I just can't do it anymore.
I would not be surprised if we could run into each other at some point.
I know.
Maybe I'll see your face and be like, I know you, but it seems like based on what you're talking about that it's possible for us to not come into, some kind of, bump in or something.
Yeah, we've definitely been in St. Vitus at the same time before. I don't know if we've spoken to each other, but yeah, you like I was talking to you before the show. You look very familiar.
Nice. Well, we'll have to change that. So, but yeah, your story is the same. The fundamental of it, at least, I feel the same way.
So, doing some research about you, Chris, you are starting a songwriting production team with Sergio Vega from Quicksand and formerly Deftones, yes?
Correct.
Let's talk about this. This is intriguing.
Sergio, I met, just a quick backstory. I actually met him as a fan before he was in Deftones. I think he had filled in for them at one point, but when I moved to the city on East 5th and Bowery, I was hanging out at a place called Lit. Maybe you've been there.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a DJ there with Chaka from Burn and Orange 9. So I would see them there often and had friends that worked there. And I was just starstruck. So I would talk to them. I don't even know if he remembers that so much. I've told him about it, but for a lot of us, those days are kind of like hazy. But that's my recollection of meeting him. And then when we got that Deftones tour that I was just talking about, actually, I skipped another part. I was working out at a gym. I still go there sometimes. It's in Bushwick, and it's called Physical Culture Collective, and it's Gavin from the band Burn, his gym. And I would run into Sergio there At this point, he's now in Deftones, and we saw each other there. And then I ended up on this tour. So then we saw each other again. So we had just been like sort of like crossing paths so much at a certain point. It was like unavoidable. And then Spotlights ends up on tour with Quicksand. So there's another time that we're kind of crossing paths. When the pandemic happened, he reached out to me and had a wonderful idea about, as we're aging, who knows? Like, we may not want to tour anymore. We may not be able to, and you have to kind of set yourself up in a way to continue writing or recording or being active in music, and also for us, like, we're trying to make a living in some way. It's a lot of side hustles and a lot of stuff like that collectively makes up your living when you're kind of living this way. And I think he had this genius idea, which is like, in hip hop, you have Dr. Dre or NERD or, even like if you want to go into other sort of aspects of production, like there's like the Wrecking Crew from back in the day where they wrote and performed so many songs on so many records, from like Beach Boys to Elvis. And like in our genre, you don't really hear so much about that. It's like, there's like a couple of key players that are producers, but him and I collectively play every instrument. He has demoed songs for his bands where he wrote and recorded everything and sent it to them. And I do that with Light Tower. And I also play other instruments that I don't even play in Light Tower. I play keys. I play, I even dabbled in horns and things like that. So like, we're just both very eclectic in how we can kind of contribute on that level. So we thought, what a cool idea would it be to put ourselves out there? We can write albums, we can write songs, we could perform on them. And we are working on a track with Keith Buckley from Every Time I Die at the moment. And we have like other stuff in the works. So the idea is to get these singles out and start doing more collaborative work. And we have a name and all that. And I think he's kind of wanting us to kind of hold off on sharing some more additional details. But essentially, we're producers and performers that want to get into that realm.
Yeah, so it's almost like artists would work with you as like a producer, like you would help them with songs or punching up something. Like is it like that kind of deal?
I mean, more blatantly, I mean, like, you could kind of look at it this way, like perhaps there's a Ghostman album and he needs somebody to write that record and perform on it, or he needs someone to write and perform 2 songs, or, maybe Miley Cyrus wants to put out an album and they're looking for songwriters and people to play on it. Like, we're totally looking to kind of go into that direction. But I think for now we're starting with the singles to kind of get our music out in that respect so that people can kind of see what we're doing. But, we're not looking to tour or do anything outside of the studio. So we just want to be like in the studio working on what ends up on the records.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, because I have from my last band, I have one song in my head that I have to record at some point, but I don't have a rhythm section. So it's like I could go in and be like, guys, here's what we're gonna do, and boom, it's done.
Yeah, in theory, we don't have like a too defined of like a thing where we're like, we want to be very open about the whole thing, but more predominantly just to kind of like make it clear that like we're basically studio people, as opposed to like, if we wrote and recorded music for somebody, the hopes is that we could be at a festival and a band is performing that music and we're in the audience or watching it and like, wow, that's cool. Remember when we wrote that,
So let's talk about what we've got coming up. Now, we have a new Spotlights record coming up, but it's not announced yet, so we can't give the name or anything yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can say that that there's a new Spotlights record coming out in 2023 on Ipecac, but we don't have any like title or anything like that yet.
Excellent. And folks, Light Tower, the self-titled EP, is out now on Iodine Recordings. If you're into post-hardcore, shoegaze, the kind of darker alternative stuff, definitely check it out. I mean, check it out anyway. What do you have to lose? You have everything to gain and Nothing to Lose. I love the EP. Now, you've played some gigs. Do you have any more coming up? What's the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a gig coming up on July 31st at St. Vitus, and it's the anniversary of Limited to One Records, great record store. And the lineup is going to be announced soon. It's really exciting. And then late August, I'm working on a string of dates to go to Philly, Connecticut, and Boston. That's going to be with a band called Twin and a band called Lamachia. You've had him on your show, I think.
Yes. No, wait, aren't you like managing him?
That's correct. Yeah. So that's John from Candiria. His record is so good.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Thanks, man. I just am so proud of him because Candiria was up there with Meshuggah and Dillinger Escape Plan, and John being such a huge force in the songwriting, I felt, could have been, hailed like Ben Wyman or Greg or any of these guys. But, they had a pretty nasty car accident and that kind of stunted things for them. But him putting out this record is a really big deal for him. And I'm so happy that people are digging on it and that you've supported him by having it on your podcast.
Yeah, when I was talking to him, he said that you were managing him. And in my head, I was like, oh, I'm having him on the show too. Great.
So funny. Yeah. It was a good episode. And what was I saying? And we have a show on August 31st at the Broadway in Bushwick, and it's with the band called Freezing Cold and a band called The Pauses, who are wonderful. And we have some more shit coming up later on this year that we're going to be announcing eventually.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I got to come check you out.
Please. Yeah, let me know. I'll definitely list you. It'd be cool to meet you in person.
Absolutely. We got to do it. So is there any other band or anything we didn't talk about that you want to mention in the end?
I do have a band called Total Meltdown. I mentioned we have an EP out, and anyone that's into sort of Burn or Leeway or Cro-Mags, that's sort of like the vibe. And I want to shout that out because we have some shows coming up as well with that project. But yeah, man, I just want to thank you. It's really exciting to be on your show, like I said. So you've got a really cool thing going, and all of your episodes are always really fun.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for saying that. And thank you for being on the show. The amount of great music you've produced and are producing is just awesome. It's great to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll meet soon.
Yes, sir. And take care, man. And we'll definitely get together soon.
And there you have it, Chris Enriquez. That was an awesome conversation. And Joe, like I mentioned in the first segment, I really connected with him from his upbringing in New York. Now, I didn't grow up in New York, but I always like to hear about people's upbringing in New York and the show-going experience, just talking about some of the legendary performances that we've seen over the years and his experience from the beginning to On the Might of Princes, all the way up until Light Tower. Great conversation. And even just some of the struggles that he shared with sobriety and that story he told about almost blowing the Deftones tour. I'm really glad that he shared that because, and I'm just really happy that everything worked out because, everything's fine. The tour went great. So we can look back on it and laugh now. And, he learned from it. And I'm glad he's doing well and super nice person.
Well, Chris is he's inspiring and inspired, and he's the perfect example of a fan who not only got to what band hasn't he seen, let alone been in? You know what I mean? Like he all his heroes, he's seen them or he's been in their bands. It's incredible. And it's just through the honestly determination, hard work, and skill. I mean, his chops at drums, his chops on bass, his chops on guitar, his chops singing now. It's just nothing stood in his way. He's like, you know what? I want to do this and I want to do it well. I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it well. And I'm going to do it so well that I perform at the level that the people that really inspire me perform at. And he did it repeatedly for years and years and years. It's really, it's inspiring. I said that before, but it's true. That's the thing that I think about most when I think about Mr. Enriquez.
Yeah, he seems like a consummate professional. Like if I'm putting together a band and I can get him in it, he's going to show up, he's going to be ready, and whatever instrument he's playing, he's just going to kill it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, with Judas Knife, when we, we won't practice for months at a time. We'll meet up at time to load in for the show. We'll have a pickup practice, maybe to just like mark through the songs, and then we play the show. And it's like, I don't worry for a moment that he doesn't have everything covered.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he does. And everybody in the band is like that. But Chris is just one of those special people that if he says he's going to do something, he will, and he'll do it expertly.
Now, Joe, since you're here, since I have you here, let's talk about how we are doing, and by we, I mean you. I mean, people hear from me enough. Let's give it to us, Joe. What's going down with you?
Musically, things are crazy. Her Heads on Fire has been building momentum since the first single came out. Actually, before that, since the split with Jay Robbins came out at the top of the year. So things have been just going pretty damn smooth. Our last single came out and the album drops Friday, the 29th. And, working with Casey on that, the band playing shows, getting out there. We're going to be getting on the road with One Line Drawing and Joe from Smoke or Fire. We're going to be doing a brief tour down to Fest.
That sounds like a great little Iodine tour. One Line Drawing, you in Her Head's on Fire, and Joe from Smoke or Fire.
Yeah, it's going to be a hoot. I mean, I can't imagine the tour stories that we'll all be sharing backstage. Not trying to one up each other, but the thing about tour stories is you're not trying to one up each other as much as you're trying to say, did this happen to you too? Have you had this common experience? Have we shared this experience? Because it's like, being in a room with people that have been touring musicians for decades is a particular mindset that you can tap into. So, I get to pick apart Jonah's and Joe's brain and talk to them like, hey man, have you ever played this place? What did you think of this? Or, we've all been on major labels. Was it weird for you? Yeah. So that stuff's always fun to talk about.
Having spoken to all of you, I can almost hear the conversations and each person's unique flavor. And I wish I could be there to hear some of it.
Well, hopefully the later the nights get and the more the tour goes on, the more ridiculous it'll get.
And how's everything going with the label? I mean, you gave us some updates in the first part. It sounds like good things are happening all the time.
Great things are happening all the time. And there's something that's going to happen in November that you're never going to not hear about. And I'm not going to say anything more than that, but something's happening in November that you're never going to not hear about.
I think I know what that is. And you know what? I'm not even going to speculate a little bit. I'm just going to nod my head in agreement. I'm doing that right now.
Good. That'll be, if I had champagne, I would open it.
Yeah. If I could still drink champagne, I would go to your wine store.
Yeah.
And buy a bunch and drink it. But
that would be fun. We could go through and I could be like, well, you might want to try the Charles Heidsieck or, the Paul Roget, depending on if you're going to have it with caviar or lobster.
Yeah. I really want to, but if I do that, there's a good likelihood that you'll never hear from me again and there'll be no more podcast.
Oh, no, we're not. Then I would rather have the podcast and hearing from you. Alcohol's definitely not worth that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And how are you doing personally, Joe? I mean, it's been a little while since I've spoken to you.
I'm good. I feel it's always trying to keep things in that moment, in that sweet spot on the surfboard. There's so much going on around you and there's so many things that you're doing and involved in. I was talking with Vinny from I Am the Avalanche in the Movie Life the other day. He came out to one of our shows at St. Vitus and he asked me, he's like, how has fatherhood changed you? Because he's not a dad himself. And I said, man, I think more than anything, fatherhood has made me acutely aware of my own mortality. And I feel so lucky to be able to play music with the caliber of musicians that I'm able to collaborate with, to perform at the places I'm able to perform with other people, to share that experience. I feel so fortunate to be able to watch my children grow up and give them experiences, if it's a hayride or swimming or kayaking or whatever we're doing. It's just like everything is so everything feels like it's dialed up to 20 these days, but in a great way, not in an overwhelming way, but in a way that makes me want to just hold on to every second of life and savor it. I've been in a really good place. And it's something I just want to continue as much as I can.
I love that. I feel the same way. I mean, it was a mere 5 years and some months ago that I was still like horribly addicted to drugs and hating myself and not doing anything. And I just had a really bad outlook in general, which I was carrying for a long time. And I never would have imagined now that I'd be here talking to you. And same thing, I'm working on music that I love. I'm working on content that I love between the gaming stuff and the podcast, which I get to do every week. I get to talk to all the musicians that I loved growing up. So I really appreciate every day. And I know to everyone listening, I know I've said this a lot lately, but you know, if I even feel a little bit down, I just think about 5 years ago and I'm like, wow, like I don't have to do that anymore. So
do you still wake up and like be like, oh my God, I'm sober. Oh my God, I'm not hungover. What a wonderful feeling.
Not most days, because it feels kind of distant at this point.
That's great.
But there's moments where I really think about it, especially when I fly. Like today I flew and it kicks up a lot in airports because, you know, I'd usually be in pretty bad shape flying somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I'd run out and then I'd have to fly home and rush home to get more. So times like right now, I'll think about it a little more. And then I'm like, hey, I can go to the airport and I can sit down and have a meal and I can drink water and I don't have to rush home like a lunatic to make a phone call because I'm sick.
Right.
Yeah. So it's key moments like that I think about it.
God, that's awesome. It's so wonderful.
I just wake up happy. I'm like, I'm working from home and then I can just ease into my day like an old man into a warm bathtub.
The older you get, the more the routine sets in and you savor it. There's nothing wrong with routine.
Exactly. And if I had kids, forget about it. Like Joe, I'm on YouTube and I'll watch like an old thing that I watched as a kid. And it doesn't even have to be sad necessarily. And I'm almost in tears. So if I had kids and I was sharing these experiences with kids and making new ones with kids that are mine, I would be a blubbering mess all the time, but that would be
busy.
fun.
You're too busy to be a blubbering mess.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you'll have those moments like, you know, right before you fall asleep, you'll be like, oh my God, that was so beautiful. You're just too damn busy.
How many kids do you have?
I've got twins and they're 7 and that's all I'm going to have.
No.
Yeah.
Twins?
Yeah. 1 boy, 1 girl. It's great.
You have fraternal twins? That's incredible. My sister has fraternal twins. And Tommy, my old co-host on the show, who you know, he had twins as well.
It's intense.
A lot of twins out there.
Yeah. But it's also pretty. The only downfall of it, and I think I actually mentioned this when we did the podcast originally, is you never feel like you have enough time for each of them. You know, so sometimes like Nina will come downstairs before Leo gets up, and I'll have breakfast with just her. And it's so sweet and beautiful and nice. And I'm like, oh man, this is nice to just like, to be like just you and me, rather than like with the both of them where I'm like, I'm constantly putting out fires. Yeah. Don't do that. Use your fork. Go ahead. No, you need to chew. Can you please sit up straight? You know, like that kind of stuff. It's just like, but anyways, yeah.
I wonder how you find all the time between the 2 bands, the label and twins.
I drink a tremendous amount of coffee and I don't watch sports.
Yeah.
And I don't follow sports. I don't watch TV. I have no shows that I watch. Like once in a blue moon, my wife and I will watch like, I don't know, we're still in the 2nd season of Schitt's Creek. You know what I mean? Like that's my entertainment.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm just constantly working on either the podcast or other content. And I mean, I don't watch a lot of TV shows. I don't watch sports. It's like podcast, band, gaming content, whatever else I'm doing.
Because you get whatever you need from that. I mean, it's not to knock people that watch sports or TV shows. I mean, that's great. Like if they're whatever they're getting from that, you know, as long as it's enriching, I mean, that's wonderful. But I get what I need from doing a little bit more, trying to be a little bit more active in projects, as opposed to, as much as I love watching films or like really good TV, I get more out of just creating.
Yeah. And I have been watching a little more TV. Have you watched Better Call Saul?
No, though I love Bob Odenkirk since Mr. Show, but I'm sure it's phenomenal.
Did you watch Breaking Bad back in the day?
No, it's because my wife was like 7 months pregnant, and we watched the first episode of Breaking Bad together, and I just looked at her and I said, "I'm sure this is brilliant. I'm sure it's great, but with a baby on the way or two on the way, I just don't have room in my life for this much negativity, and I can tell that this is only going to get more and more negative. There's going to be no horizon for these folks."
It gets grim.
Yeah.
It gets grim. So yeah, just save those for one day if you're, if you feel like diving down into the depths. So yeah, that's it for this one. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Chris. We hope you enjoyed hearing from us. And I've got a special bonus episode dropping this week on Thursday. So make sure you tune in for that. I'm going to give you a hint. It's a band I've been talking about a lot lately, and they're really good. Think about it. Think about it. So that's it. See you Thursday. Thanks everybody for listening, and see you Thursday.